I think as humans, we all have this communal longing. We want to have this human experience with other humans in a group. So to be an outsider or different is not always the best experience, especially for a child. We want to be communal.
Go the Distance is a series which features people who have discovered how to turn their pain into power, and they're now impacting their world in very positive ways. I'm your host, Cherrie Garden. The way you feel about yourself and other people will shape your world for the better, or will shape your world for the worse. Artist, poet, and philanthropist Amber Jasmine, affectionately known as Empress Jasmine, shows us how she found a way to change her life from within.
I remember going to sleep, unsure of morning. Thank you. Those memories make every morning bird song so sweet. Ashe, Amen, Hallelujah. I remember being away from home, not knowing what I would eat. Thank you. That hunger makes today's supper so sweet. I remember being serenaded by your choir of birds in Arizona. Thank you. That memory makes Atlanta traffic so sweet. I remember hurting myself. Thank you. That memory makes this embrace so sweet. Thank you. I feel really fortunate to have a big family. I feel though that for some reason I was a lot more sensitive to, in general, than my family could handle. So a lot of times, if I was experiencing something emotion-wise, it was alone. I grew up with 7 men, my brothers. So in that way, I would describe it as maybe confusing, or maybe just isolated. We went through this adoption. I had gotten taken by another family. I wouldn't say staying, they were literally trying to take me from my family. But I just know that my brother and I were at home by ourselves, and we were too young to be at home by ourselves. Oh. They took us to a foster home. My brother never got adopted, but I did. And this woman, I remember this woman really wanted me to be her daughter. And the experience of going through court and just wanting to go back home so bad, and then getting to go back home and then finding my little brother there. I was living with them for almost a year maybe, and then, or a few months, I don't remember how long. But I do know that they wanted me to be their daughter. Some strange people in the world. Or caring, depending on how you look at it. Now, up until this time, my mother had raised 4 children, including the 3 from my brother's father. She kind of co-raised them, because I remember growing up and them being in my home. These are my brothers. Mm-hmm. And then it gets to me and they're like, oh, maybe you can't do this. Right. So just that alone was an isolated experience. But then when you also take into consideration the fact that I look different from everyone else, I think I didn't notice until I started going to school and the other kids were like, were you adopted? Are you white? Why your brother's black? And I'm like, I don't know, and then I started asking these questions. They used to call me Elmira. That was my nickname. The Looney Tune character.
Oh.
And she was in love with everything. And I would spend more time with my cats, and then we got puppies. I would spend more time with my animals, like caring for them. And I used to bring them around in like this little wagon. And my brothers would be like making fun of me or whatever. But I found it as a great outlet for me.
So how did that feel growing up? Okay, you said that you didn't even realize that anything was different until you went to school and people were telling you that, hey, are you adopted or something? Was that part of what made you feel isolated, or for the most part, hey, everything was just, you didn't really feel any difference?
I did mention that it was not really affecting me until I went to school and people started asking questions about me and my siblings. However, there were moments before then when my older brothers would tease me. They'd be like, white girl, white girl. Now, I had never met my father. So my mother had never sat me down and explained, you look different because of this. So I didn't know take this seriously right? I'm like, oh, it's because I'm light skinned. So I didn't take it to heart. But after finding out that I really was different, my father is European, I think it made me more conscious of what someone looking different, what that can do to them. For instance, I don't think that all the time children realize that there's beauty in being unique. And so for me, I started to realize that looking different can affect us in many ways. I always tried to make it affect me positively, but there were things that were out of my control, emotional reactions. Well, I thought they were out of my control. So it made me more aware of what every individual might be experiencing on account of their skin color.
What was your reaction when your brothers would tease you a little bit, call you white girl and things like that? Did you ever run off into your room crying? Did you just want to curl up in a ball? Or did you just say, and just continue playing a video game? What was that like for you?
I used to ignore it because I could tell that my mother was unbothered by it. So as a child, especially as a female, you mimic your mother. So I mimicked her, I'm like, whatever. Then I started noticing that it was affecting me, and this is how I knew. There's a scene in Tarzan, with the animation, where he finds mud and he starts to cover his skin in in the mud, which was the dark brown, to look like his family. And it touched me so deep. And that's when I realized, oh, these things have been affecting me. But up until then, I just thought I was light-skinned. I didn't really understand. But then when the teasing started and the questioning started, and I didn't really have any answers, what I thought was me ignoring the problem was really internalizing it. And when I saw that scene in Tarzan, I realized, oh, it affected me. I want to be browner, I want to be darker. So my experience with my appearance made me more aware of people's longing to be something other than what they are. Not just for a biracial person, but for Black people, for white people. I think that I realized that everyone was experiencing this.
You mentioned that you started writing when you were smaller as well. That's interesting because when you say younger, are you talking about single digit age, or you mean more like adolescent, preteen?
Single digit.
Really? What kind of things do you remember writing about? What would inspire you and capture you to make you want to write?
God. What we are calling God. I always felt something inside of me, and I would write about it. And I would write I remember going through some old books when we were moving, and I see these little note cards with these bubble letters. I used to write in bubble letters.
Oh.
And it's like, God, thank you for whatever. Love your child, Amber. So a lot of my material was about God. I didn't even start writing about my own experience until high school, maybe.
So you had a level of understanding or familiarity with the concept of God as a smaller child. Was that because your mother taught you? Did she bring you to church a lot? What was your religious acclamations at that time?
I couldn't stand church. I couldn't stand church. For me, my mother, yes, she did teach us. Not only me, she taught all of us. And most of it was just by seeing her pray. Okay. She prayed a lot. Single mother of 6. And, you know, foreign. She prayed a lot, and I got to see. Most of my spiritual experiences, though, outside of church was in nature. Like again, this feeling of isolation. I would talk to the trees, and my brothers would be like, "The hell you doing?" or just, she's weird, you know. But those were the majority of my spiritual experiences. And then after those things, when I started learning about Rasta, I felt like my heart was being satisfied with the teachings of Rasta.
How did you start learning about Rastafarianism? You're talking about, how did you start learning about that?
Through the music.
Through the music that your mother was playing in the house.
My oldest brother was a DJ.
Oh.
And he would play all of these old Rasta tunes. And I would say, especially Sizzla. When I heard Sizzla, this is when I was growing up too, 95, 96.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy Jah, that album. I was like, okay, this is real to me. This is better for me than church. I felt like it was so much more real. There was more depth to what he was saying. And very specific. No room for error. Very, you know, sometimes religion can be very parable-ish.
So I noticed you're referring to it as Rasta music. For our viewers, could you distinguish the difference between what you call Rasta music as opposed to reggae music? Because I think you're also referring to a type of reggae music, if I understand.
Yeah, well, it's all reggae. But for me, the distinguishment comes in when we're talking about the content of the lyrics. Because some reggae music is good, you can dance to it, talking about all things. Rasta is me mention of Rasta and the lifestyle that comes with Rasta, or the principles that they put before their listeners. It's like a guide, a way to live. Also a warning. Beware of these things. Bob Marley, Luciano, Garnet Silk, Gregory Isaacs. I really loved his voice. Barris, of course. I heard the things they were saying, it spoke to me, so I started to read literature from Haile Selassie. I started to study that culture. They put before me a black king. Some were saying he was God. At a time when I was going to church and I'm looking at imagery, these people look nothing like me.
Tell me about that black king, because once again, there's people that are not as familiar with Rastafarianism. Tell me what you're talking about.
Haile Selassie, I'm talking about him. Rastafari.
Is that the same person?
Yes, the same person. So when I listened to Rasta, they kept telling me about this black king. Bob Marley once said, our God is a living man, a black man. And so I started to become curious. I'm like, what? I knew it. Like everything he was saying, I was feeling it. I don't know if I ever believed Haile Selassie was God. But as a child, I saw the value in that idea. I saw the value in that. I said, this is better for us as a people. This is much better he looks like us. He's for us. I started researching all the projects that he implemented while he was in power, and he obviously cared about us. He set out a set of some land, 500 acres of land, told us to come home if we want to. He set up the African Union. He set up the airport where it connected the entire continent of Africa. This man cared about us. Why aren't we talking more about him? Why don't I know more? Why I had to listen to music? I had all these questions, but mostly I had a sense of fulfillment. So, Haile Selassie, check him out, you know, and Empress Menen, there's a black queen. What?
Was that his wife?
Yes, Empress Menen. So, wow, all my life I'm learning about Bill Clinton, George Bush, their first wives. I go to school, I'm learning about these white men and their wives. And I never really connected to any of those things. So when I told you earlier I couldn't stand school, that's what I couldn't stand. That information wasn't speaking to me. Music though.
So there was a particular scenario that you were sharing with us that really influenced you, even influences your appearance to this day. And you know, tell us a little bit about that particular scenario you were talking about.
So you mean by the scar I have here when you say my appearance? Okay, so when I was four, I was mauled by a dog. The dog was chained up on our tree, and my brother found out I fed the dog. My older brother Jamar. He found out that I fed the dog and asked me not to go near the dog again. So I said, okay.
Was it your dog?
No. It belonged to my brother's father.
Okay.
I think we were just watching him for a few days or something. And then so I wanted to go outside, but I wanted to avoid the dog, like my brother told me. So I went underneath the pillars that upheld the stairs that led from our back door down. It was a 2-story home, so it led us down. So, you know, the structures the pillar that keep up the steps, and then there's that underway. I went under there. And then once I got past the dog, I was like, okay. So I started like skipping to the front yard. And I remember hearing his little his steel chain pop. And I turned around to see what happened, and he was on me by then. And I couldn't really do anything. He was a very large dog. He's a German Shepherd, and I was a very small child. But I do remember instinctively holding my ears because it felt like he was going to eat my ears. So I held my ears and I just started screaming. And my mother and my brother were home at the time, and they both came. I'm not really sure who got the dog off of me, but I do remember my mother carried me to the front yard. And then from there we waited on someone to come and let us use their phone, and someone did, and then we called the ambulance. And I mean, it felt like forever. I do remember feeling dizzy and numb and really concerned for my life. I thought I was going to die.
How did you feel about the dog?
In all honesty, I remember going under for the procedure. I felt sleepy. The doctor at the time said go to sleep, and when I woke up, it had been done, the stitches, and they're all over. I have places in my scalp where hair just doesn't grow anymore, but this is the visible one. Anyway, I woke up and I asked, where's the dog? I think those were my first words. And someone explained to me the dog is dead. They put him down. And my heart dropped, and I said, no, why? And my mother, or someone there, I think it was my mother, said to me, what if that had been another child?
I know you were filled with fear, but did you black out? Did you feel like this was the end? I know you're so young, you don't really have a concept of what is the end, but what sensation in that realm do you feel like you felt?
I can't say we don't have a concept of it, especially me, because I raised many animals and I've watched a lot of them die. So I knew what death was. It wasn't strange to me. It feels concerning. That's the biggest. It feels very fearful, but then you just start getting concerned. And I just remember saying a lot, I'm not ready to die. I'm not ready to die. And I saw my mother, and she looked, I think the experience traumatized her more, just from watching her. And she was biting on bloody rags, and she was so not aware of herself. And she was very scared. And I saw that, and I said, okay, I'm gonna die. And a neighbor came over, he was much more calm. And I said, am I gonna die? And he said, no. I said, are you sure? And he said, you're not gonna die. I said, well, what are they gonna do to me? He said, they're gonna fix you up. They also gave me this cute little bear that had been mauled too, and he had stitches. You know, it was a bear that I left the hospital with, like a friend who had went through what I went through. It was some kind of therapy they give the children before they leave the hospital. I think in a lot of ways it made me scared of dying. But then in a lot of ways it made me more sober too, to the fact that life is not promised, and it does end, and it can end, and it will end. So what will I do now while I'm here? And it took me a while to answer the question. I was 4 when that happened. I can't really say I answered that question until I was 23. So I remember that year, being 23, thinking, what will I do with this breath?
So prior to that, like when you were growing up, you know, from in between 23 and 5, tell me about some challenges that you faced within yourself outside of just what everybody else saw. When you were alone in your room, what were some things that you felt or went through that you didn't understand? What were those sensations like?
Yeah. I mentioned to you that I think my level of sensitivity was high, especially in comparison to the people I grew up with. And at some point, I started to be convinced that I was too emotional. Maybe bipolar, starting like looking books, you know, like, oh, borderline disorder, like trying to give myself a disorder through education. And eventually I just started to numb myself. If my brothers or someone in the street had said anything to me, I would not feel. I remember while I was in high school, vowing to not cry. So I didn't cry for 4 years. Just a numbing experience.
And what made you vow to not cry?
I thought I was too sensitive.
Okay. So, do you feel that this sensitivity brought about a type of I don't know, isolation, depression? How did you, what type of sensations were you feeling?
I think that I learned then that anyone who tries to pull themselves out of themselves, the result is death. You may not die physically, but your spirit will feel that. Bob Marley has a song, he says, running and you're running and you're running away, but you can't run away from yourself. And if you were born with a heightened sense of feeling and you try to numb that, there's no way that you're not going to experience death in some form. And for me, it was the death of my spirit. I started to just get really depressed. I remember being so numb that I would burn myself. Like, if I had a cut, I would break it and put alcohol on it. Or if I was getting my hair done, I wouldn't say anything if it burned. Or just heat, like fire, being in the shower, the water being scalding hot. And even the relationships that I were in, just fire. I would use that word to describe them, because I had chosen to numb myself, to try and pull myself away from myself. You cannot do that. And for what? For like to fit in with other people.
Did you feel like you were able to fit in a little better
Never.
when you did that?
On the outside, but inside never. But on the outside, yes. Even with the people that I had made my friends, the circles that I had become a part of in school, fraudulent. They weren't a reflection of who I truly was. It was more so, I can't handle who I truly am. She's really intense.
I guess I'm trying to put myself in your shoes and trying to feel what it might have felt like, that isolation, that need for wishing someone would understand but they don't, so therefore trying to just numb myself out and kind of close myself in.
And also be a part of what they're experiencing. I think as humans, we all have this communal longing. We want to have this human experience with other humans in a group. So to be an outsider or different is not always the best experience, especially for a child. We want to be communal. I remember having to fill my body with substances to feel again, only half alive. Now only emptying my body makes me move with life. Inside the violin, there is not another violin, she's empty, as she waits for her master to play her strings, to make her speak. Yesterday's memories make today's emptiness feel so sweet. Ashe, Amen, Hallelujah.
You've said a few times the death energy kind of comes when you try to take yourself away from yourself or separate yourself from yourself. And I understand when you say you were doing it to fit in, but what exactly does it mean to take yourself away from yourself? The reason I ask is because in religion, in Christianity, you can say, talk about dying to yourself and, dying to the flesh and things like that. And then even in psychology, they talk about being able to control your emotions. Everything that you feel doesn't mean that you have to because people have anger issues and stuff like that. So just because anger comes naturally to a person doesn't mean they should continue to just lash out and angry. So if you could distinguish what that meant when you say taking yourself away from yourself, and how in your case you mean it as something, I guess that's where I'm kind of confused.
What do I mean when I say taking myself away from myself?
Mm-hmm.
I think a simple way to explain that would be to distinguish between the smaller s and the capital S. Taking myself, which I consider the small s, from myself, the big S, the capital S, the revered self, the soul, the creator. It's in all of us. And I think that's what makes us who we are. We're all individual expressions of this creator. And so you have a self inside of you, I have a self inside of me. And my heightened sensitivity is a part of that self. My inclinations, my passions, that's all a part of that self. Therefore, when I try to separate from them, from that big S, from the capital S within me, I experience what the world has to offer, which is death. But when I come back into that capital S self, I experience what it has to offer, which is life.
You currently run an organization called the Art of Esteem. What I want to know is, where did this idea come from? Could you tell us about the beginnings of it? What type of things started budding in your mind based off of certain experiences that you had?
So, the Art of Esteem is my joy. The Art of Esteem is a program that's dedicated to raising the esteem of our students, the individual esteem, and the collective, so the cultural consciousness of our children. And remember, I told you I took the best aspects of all those programs that I had created and put it into this one. So the first is the way our children speak. Has to be addressed. Some of them speak from that energy we talked about earlier. I've heard children say some heartbreaking things before. And they're familiar to me because I once said them to myself. So we address how powerful the word can be, and we do these through physical exercises, showing them the effects of the words they say on their own bodies, among other ways. So we address the way that they speak, and then how they see within themselves, and then what they create. This is all a part of their visual process. So we address it. We address the way they see themselves. And the reason I know that this is something that needs to be addressed because I did a little experiment with children. You put before them a piece of paper and crayons and tell them, draw yourself. Now from Jamaica to Atlanta to Africa, I saw a pattern of children drawing something other than a representation of themselves, a true representation. So we acknowledge that this is a problem, and we also try to build up their esteem so much that if I put before them an array of colors, they would use the one that best reflects them out of love. And then the fourth component, which would be Aboriginal culture, pre-colonial. So we give them insight into their culture, wherever they're from, in a pre-colonial lens. Another thing that I saw with the children is that they had no frame of reference prior to slavery. And that can make you want to take yourself out of that culture, if that's all you're being given in terms of information. So the Art of Esteem makes sure that these students have information from which to draw to build up their esteem. Oh, did you know there were kings and queens that look like you? Did you know that there were communities that were communal and never ostracized? Did you know that there were communities in which no one was ever disciplined in the way that we know discipline, but they were raised up instead? I'm talking about the pygmies now. They don't fight and they don't reprimand. Everything they do is purely based on an awareness of the humanness, of the loveliness, the sacredness of the other human. So growing up in our society, it's not necessarily the case. So I make our students aware of these things so that there is not only esteem being developed, but hope, a sense of curiosity. Well, if I didn't know that, what else don't I know?
Strong and I am worthy. I am strong and I am worthy. I am strong and I am worthy.
Very good.
I am strong.
In her daily work with children, Amber Williams teaches them a very important principle, something we do every day whether we know it or not: the misuse of the power of words. How much do our own words affect the very strength and weakness of our bodies? Well, let's see.
I was the only child. I don't have any little cousins.
This is like a foreign world to me. The only child, no cousins. What the?
I mean, I have cousins, but but they're older. I don't have younger cousins. So there was no reason for me to be around anyone younger than me.
It's amazing. It's amazing.
Never changed a diaper. So that's kind of why kids screaming and crying kind of gets to me a little bit. I mean, I don't want to do anything to the kid, but I just feel like, oh, please stop.
Me, I'm like,
I'm like, why? So I don't know. I hope that changes when I have a child. Or
Well, there'll be a lot of different chemical changes in you that will make you different. Yeah. So don't worry about that.
Thank you for that reassurance.
So remember when I told you earlier that the discourse is such an important part of the program? I'm going to show you why, and then for everyone watching, you can follow along. The reason that we chant "I am strong and I am worthy" before all of our classes is because it literally affects your body. So I'm going to show you how. Raise your arms straight forward, and don't let me push you down. Okay? I saw this on a video. The host was Jack Canfield. It was amazing. Put your arms down. Obviously you have strength, you're able to resist me. And now close your eyes and say the opposite of "I am strong and I am worthy," which is "I am weak and unworthy." 10 times, I will count for you, okay? I know, but it has a good ending, I promise. So just "I am weak and unworthy," and I will count for you.
I am weak and unworthy. 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 Are we at 10 yet?
No.
I am weak and unworthy. I am weak and unworthy. I am weak and unworthy.
One more time.
I am weak and unworthy.
Okay, now raise your arms back up and try to resist in the same way.
Okay.
Okay, wait. So let's reverse that experience. I don't want to leave you like that.
No.
So close your eyes again and say the Art of Esteem mantra, which is "I am strong and I am worthy," and I will count for you again. So just focus on your words.
I am strong and I am worthy. 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 I am strong and I am worthy.
Again.
I am strong and I am
One more
worthy.
time.
I am strong and I am worthy.
You're gonna be like still over here. Okay, raise your arms back up. Resist me. No movement at all. So what did you just experience?
A psychosomatic effect in my body.
Alright, so talk to us like we're 3-year-olds.
The first time when I said "I am weak and unworthy," and then you pressed my arms, my arms went down. But then after you had me say "I am strong and I am worthy," you pressed my arms the same way, and for some reason it did not budge anywhere close to the way it did previously.
Yeah. Well, the reason is that you do have a connection between your words and your physical body, even your brain, even the way that you perform before a test. There are lots of studies done about the performance of a child academically, depending on what they are repeating in their minds. So just to make sure that our students are off at a great start, I am strong and I am worthy. I am strong and I am worthy. I am strong and I am worthy 10 times, and then we go into our course, whatever it is. And I show the students this. I encourage them to share with others. They're always amazed. They're like, what? What?
So guys, definitely find a partner. Who do you normally suggest they do it with?
Someone who matters in their lives. It's like when you find a good book, you want to share it with your siblings, with your spouse, with your coworkers. Do the same thing with these exercises.
So find a loved one or a friend and do that same exercise and let us know what happens.